Making data centers in Europe sustainable. This is the title of this afternoon's session. We're in week 2 of the Europe Sustainable Energy Week, the Policy Week. A week loaded with different sessions, and all the sessions of the afternoon are geared around digitalization and energy, the overlap and the intersection among them. It's only fair to discuss about data centers since they represent about, depending on the account, 3 to 4% of energy demand in Europe. Together with me around the table and remotely, we have a fantastic panel and quite diverse panel, I must say, of experts of different profiles. Around the table, I've got with me MEP Niels Fuglsang. I've got a representative from a consultancy, MF Ryer, but we'll see that you have a very broader background. We have Claudia Germant from Digital Europe, and joining remotely, we have Professor Peter Radgen from the University of Stuttgart and Dan Terpstra from SDIA, which I will introduce in detail. We'll take a few minutes to give some opening statements of the different speakers, and then we'll discuss along 3 different topics related to data centers and energy and sustainability. There will not be any poll question on Slido, but I've got a screen next to me here with the questions and answers that every one of you remotely can ask. The QR code should be on your screen somewhere to ask your questions and vote for each other's best question. I promise that we'll take due diligence at those. But without further ado, our first speaker, the Honourable Member Niels Fuglsang, and we are honoured to have you this afternoon. We'll speak about the details of the Energy Efficiency Directive, of which you are rapporteur in a few moments, and we'll of course focus on the data center aspects, which are the core of today's discussion. But beyond introducing yourself, maybe you can start by already setting a little bit the tone of the Energy Efficiency Directive and the broader framework, because data center is a sub part of it. But of course, in the current international context, it's a directive and a negotiation which has attracted a lot of spotlight, and we're all very eager to hear from you. Niels, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Manuel, and thank you for taking your time to the audience to come here and discuss with us, to my fellow panelists. I think it's a timely subject, both because we're negotiating the Energy Efficiency Directive right now, trying to agree on provisions for data centers and energy efficiency for data centers, and also in light of the general situation that we face with energy scarcity. We need to use our energy more efficiently. To say a few words about the overall directive that we are negotiating, and we just 2 weeks ago we just got a majority in the European Parliament for our position. It's a broad compromise which is backed by the major political groups, the S&D, the Socialists and Democrats that I represent, the EPP, the Conservative Group, the Renew Group, and the Greens. And so we have a pretty broad, or very broad majority backing our positions, and now we will go into the trialogues already next week in Strasbourg. We will start the first meeting with the Czech presidency. In overall terms, I would say that we have the European Commission proposed the Energy Efficiency Directive a year ago, or more than a year ago, in July last year actually, and the Commission proposed a 9% target, 9% increase of energy efficiency in 2030 compared to this 2020 baseline scenario for how much our final energy consumption would be in 2030 if we just did business as usual. We had to be 9% below that. But after the war in Ukraine, Putin's war in Ukraine, the Commission came with the Repower EU proposal and said, well, what we proposed originally is, in light of current events, not ambitious enough. So we will raise the 9% to 13%. And what we have agreed on in the European Parliament is then to increase it another notch from 13 to 14.5%. So, and we say that it needs to be binding both on an EU level, but also for the individual member states who will all get a sub-target. And so I think, and as mentioned, this is backed by a broad majority in the European Parliament, and I think it shows that we all know, the political groups, that we need to be ambitious on this agenda because we want to become independent of Mr. Putin's fossil fuels. So we need to be more energy efficient. And then we'll see, I hope, that the Council will agree that we need to keep the ambition level high, and that we'll find out in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Niels. I think this sets the broader political and policy framework very well. I know there's a lot of people online and in the room very eager to discuss the data centers specific provisions of this ongoing negotiation on the Energy Efficiency Directive. We'll come back to that in a moment after introducing the next speakers. Emma, to my left, lady in red. To me, you are Lady Data Center in Europe. I think your bio officially says that you are a partner at ERM Consultancy, but I think many of us know you as Tech UK representative in the past. You've been sitting on the board of the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact, and essentially you have a long past of experience. What would be the, so with your broad overview, if you were to structure a bit the debate in, say, 4 pillars or 4 drivers, how would you set the discussion?
Oh, thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And yes, I am at ERM now, the largest global sustainability consultancy, but I spent 10 years at Tech UK doing the big picture, and now I've gone to somewhere where I lift the bonnet and look at the engine. So it's a really different perspective. So I'm having fun there. Yes, I'd say there are 5 things I'd quite like to sort of use to structure thinking the debates. I think, firstly, we've got to look at the challenges, and they are obvious, but the problem with challenges is they are compounded by complexity in this sector in particular. So the second one is compounding factors. First, challenges. Secondly, compounding factors. Thirdly, we need to talk about what data centers do well. They do some stuff well, really well. Then we need to talk about where more effort is needed, a bit like a school report. And then I think there are some really fundamental drivers out there for improved sustainability. So those are the things, and I'll run through, if I'm all right, can I run through those now, Manuel, is that right? So in terms of challenges, there's the obvious ones. Data centers are electro-intensive. They're large consumers of scarce resource. Secondly, the sector is growing fast, they're having to add capacity, and the sector has this habit of clustering. And where it clusters, we're seeing local constraints on power, and we're seeing pushback. And thirdly, there is an issue, I think, in the sector, which perhaps we don't talk about enough, which is the variability of performance, depending on size and age and where those data centers are. And we have to try and address that. We have to pull the laggards up. We have to encourage the leading edge, but we can't lose, we need to retain variety in the market. So it has to be equitable. That's a really tricky one, I think. But fundamentally, the biggest challenge facing data center operators is to handle this exploding demand in digital data and digital services without a parallel explosion in the energy consumption of data centers. That's the core challenge. I talked about compounding factors that make this all much more tricky. Uncertainty is one. We don't know actually how much energy data centres consume. We don't actually know how many there are. We don't know what the growth trajectory is, really. We haven't decided how we're going to count them, and we haven't even decided how we're going to define a data centre, which isn't perhaps the best place to start. Fortunately, we have had some very, very good data from the IEA, which is starting to dispel some of the sort of more random myths about the sector and give us a sort of slightly more grown-up conversation about things, so grateful for that. Second compounding factor is that data centres are underpinning the dematerialisation, digitalisation that will empower our transition to net zero, will help us decarbonise our economy. And so what we've got to work out is how you measure the net impact of that. Do we start making value judgments about what is good and what is not? And then associated with that, we have rebound. So rebound is a really problematic compounding factor. Because you think you're doing the right thing, you start teleworking, you move further away from the office, and then when you do go in, you have to go by car because you're outside the public transport system, and suddenly that actually isn't a net benefit. And then we've got the bigger problem of rebound, which is actually to do with the sector improving efficiency. And the faster you improve efficiency for digital services, which are price elastic, the faster the uptake goes. So you end up in this, what's called a Jevons paradox, where the faster you make stuff more efficient, the more people want to fit. And then I think there's also something we have to factor in with just our incredible degree of dependence on the internet, and the fact that we have to have an internet that has essentially an infrastructure that is of an industrial scale. I think we have to accept that. So those are the compounding factors. Quickly, what are data centres doing well? I think they're doing a great job on operational efficiency. A really great job. We've improved operational efficiency by something like 7 orders of magnitude in the last 30 years. Absolutely incredible changes in terms of chip performance, virtualization, and a lot of infrastructure improvements. Very good at purchasing renewables and leading that. So from buying certified renewables to power purchase agreements, now we're looking at a lot of investigation into hydrogen, green hydrogen, hydrogen-ready data centres. And also tied to that is the willingness of data centre operators to adopt and investigate and fund and develop new technologies. Less well, this is the other side of the school report. I think more effort is needed on transparency. I think particularly the business models in the sector, which tend to be freemium, advertorial, all you can eat, particularly when they're focused at consumers, don't give any signal to those consumers of the carbon impact of their activity. And I think that's an important thing we've got to address. I don't think there's enough attention on the supply chain, on circular economy and the wider value chain. Although steps are being taken by the iMasons to address that very problem. And also I think we've got problems in consistency of reporting. How do we make informed decisions and comparisons? And then I'm going to end up just by parking. I think I'm probably just nudging over time. Sorry, Manuel. The drivers I was talking about that I think are the most powerful drivers to improve sustainability in this sector, and they all begin with P. Policy, no doubt about that one. Power provisioning, because that's driving people to alternative power sources. Public perception. You know, data centre awareness is growing and not necessarily in a good way. So that is also a driver, a very important one. And then the need for partnerships, and that's strategic partnerships, whether it's to do with energy, whether it's to do with community engagement. So I'm going to leave it there, as I'm aware I'm nudging over time. But that's my sort of structure for the discussion in a perfect world.
Thank you, Emma. So Emma is the reason why I did not frame the debate myself. It's because she does it so much better than I will ever do. So thank you very much, Emma. Our next speaker in the panel is Professor Peter Radgen. Good afternoon, Peter. You are a professor at the moment at the University of Stuttgart, but looking at your bio, it seems that you've done more universities than many of us in the room. You have a PhD in energy optimization of industrial processes from the University of Duisburg. And you've been working as well at Fraunhofer, so a huge research organization. And you've been working both for the industry and within the industry. Could you And so I think you'll be both our academic and industrial expert in the virtual room today. Could you introduce yourself to the room and say a few words?
Yes, Manuel, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I just have to add an additional position, as I'm also board member of the German Data Center Association. So I'm looking also on the different aspects. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So looking on the different aspects of the data centers. So Emma already has well set the scene, so there is very little to say in addition in principle, but I will make some additional points. Well, in the past, we have had the traditional industries like the chemical industry, the mining industry, all mainly based on steel, cement, and others, using fossil fuels, emitting a lot of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions. And therefore, we had the environmental problems with emissions from these sectors. And therefore, they have been in the focus of reduction measures and energy efficiency measures. Now, what we see that these kind of industry are decreasing in size. They have taken measures. They are aiming at delivering carbon-free processes, switching to hydrogen. And data centers haven't been in the core focus as they were little data center, there was little known, and they were working on electricity. And electricity, what we have seen in the electricity sector has been decarbonized dramatically over the past. So if you look on the share of renewables in the electricity generation, yeah, you see obviously there is a much higher share in the electricity sector than in all other sectors. So what does this mean? Data centers, as Emma mentioned it, have run under the radar so far, but what we see is we see a significant increase in digitalization. We see the clusters of data centers, especially in locations growing where electricity is cheap or where there are other advantages, such as in Frankfurt, where the clustering is coming from this kind of data gravity, which gives some advantages that where data centers are, additional data centers are better placed. You see it also with other industries that you have clusters of industries. For example, for sure, if you look on the mining industry, where the brown coal lignite resources are, you will find lignite power plants. So it has a similar effect that you have clustering of sectors at places where the boundary conditions for these sectors are very large. So with this growing business of data centers, what we see is that as bigger and more important a sector gets, it needs more control, it needs more understanding and future planning for it. And then we encounter that there is very little knowledge about it. Well, that's the reason why many people, and also we in Germany, have started with ideas on what we can do to collect data. How can we manage the data of data centers? For sure, the European Commission has already introduced this revision of the energy statistics law, which added an additional category for data centers, for example, so that we are getting more insight now on individual energy consumption of data centers. But in Germany, we are currently working on a research project setting up a register for data centers, which will collect the information on all data centers in Germany. And we finally see it also as a possible blueprint on the European level. As in principle, all the numbers we are going to collect will be also the numbers which will be most likely be at the end in the European Energy Efficiency Directive. And the basic understanding behind it is that only what gets measured can get managed. And therefore, if we need the management, we need to have the information to manage it right. Also, the issue on, double counting is an issue. I would like to mention it. digitalization not only increases electricity consumption, but it helps other industries to reduce their energy consumption. So the significant energy savings in the production sectors of industry are very often closely related with digitalization, automation, and changes in the processes, which were not able without digitalization. And for sure, it's difficult then to count the savings. Are these savings linked to the data centers, or are these savings linked to the industries? So we need to be careful not to double count these kind of savings. And at the last point, I think what is even more important also in the current times, when we want to decarbonize the heating sector, data centers could be one piece of the solution, as data centers produce a lot of waste heat. And this waste heat can be easily used, well, not always completely easily, but it can be used together with heat pumps or even directly to heat our homes. And then we no longer need the national gas to heat our homes. And therefore, this will help us not only to avoid CO2 emissions from burning fossil fuels, but also to make us more independent on it. And with this, I like to close my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks a lot for all the comparison with other type of industries, which I think are extremely relevant and refreshing in this debate. And we'll come back to the development you're undergoing into for the database of German data centers, in the sense that this is one of the measures of the Energy Efficiency Directive at European level. So we'll get back into those details in a moment. But for now, I'd like to move back to the room, turning to Claudia German. You're the policy manager for digital and green transformation at Digital Europe, which in short is the European association representing not all, but a large part of the European digital industry, not only European companies, but as well international companies. Did I summarize Digital Europe well? And if so, can you compliment me and explain a little bit what, as an organization, you're doing towards sustainable data centers?
Thank you very much, Manuel. And I would like to echo the thanks to the organizers for the invitation for this panel. Indeed, you summarized it very well. We like to say that we are the leading trade association for digitally transforming industries across Europe. And as a matter of fact, at Digital Europe, we put our heads together to try and look at how we can make, or like to do our part towards ensuring that data centers are becoming climate neutral, more sustainable. And as a matter of fact, we have a dedicated working group to data centers, and this is our main aim to ensure that one of the main aims to ensure that we have a well-informed legislative framework here in Europe to help institutions and any other stakeholders. And I would like to take the opportunity to also chime in, not much to say because everyone else set the scene very well, but I think it is important from our side to just say that we welcome what's happened, the work on the Energy Efficiency Directive, so Mr. Vogelsang's work, and all the other institutions, the European Commission, the Council, of course. And as a matter of fact, I just want to stress that our members are committed to the energy efficiency first principle. This is also our credo. And also equally important for us is that data centers are acknowledged as the enablers of Europe's digital transformation. We are the backbone, and as Emma, as Peter, as Niels said, there is so much digitalization going on. There will continue to be a lot of digitalization going on, and this is all powered by data centers, so by our industry. And as a matter of fact, we have critical customers relying on us. We have hospitals, we have schools, we have ministries, so it goes beyond that. And I just want to also add and echo what Emma said regarding the latest report from the International Energy Agency. And they are stating that emissions since 2010, emissions have grown only modestly, so despite rapidly growing demand for digital services. And this is due because there have been a lot of energy efficiency improvements in IT hardware and cooling. As Peter said, renewable energy purchases by ICT companies has skyrocketed. And of course, there has been broader decarbonization of electricity grids in many regions. And of course, our members also acknowledge the current situation, what's happening on the energy front. And of course, we are ourselves one of the most advanced end use sectors in terms of both decarbonization of our own operations and of course setting ambitious goals to become climate neutral. And I just want to end my remarks by saying that our members want, and as a matter of fact are already part of the solution towards climate neutral data centers and the sustainable industry sectors across economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Very insightful, and I think the other side of the coin, so the benefits of digitalization for the society, will be part of the discussion we'll have afterwards. I think enough of you have raised that point, so that we'll get back to it. The last of our panelists is as well remote. Dan Terpstra. I hope I gave justice to your last name. You're the CEO of the Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Alliance, SDI. Dan, can you explain to us what SDI is? And I understand you're an association of companies as well, but maybe more with an NGO approach. I think as well it's fair to say that you're more international. It's not only European. I think you're as well broader than data center. You look at infrastructures in general and not only limited to data centers. And as well, I think since we're all beyond screens and keyboards, for the people online who can Google your organization, you have an amazing roadmap, technical-oriented roadmap, I would say, that goes at least until 27, 28 of, I'm not sure if you call them actions or developments on which you're working on, which I think are fascinating technically, and I think gives hopes to a lot of people who want to see the digital infrastructures to be more sustainable. Dan, the floor is yours to introduce your organization and the work you're busy with.
Thank you very much for your kind words, for the introduction. Thanks for having me today. Thanks for having me in such a distinguished panel. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here. So as said, my name is Dan, and I am the CEO of the SDIA, the Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Alliance. And we are a European-based, but a global nonprofit with ultimately the goal to increase the sustainability in the digital infrastructure. And we're doing that rather with, let's say, a somewhat engineering focus, hence the roadmap, and rather technical roadmap, by bringing together all parties throughout the entire value chain of digital infrastructure. And data centers are a part of it, are an integral and perhaps an essential part of it. But our membership spans basically from brick surrounding the data center all the way to the software and your keyboard and everything in between, because it's our view and our vision that the challenges to create a more sustainable digital infrastructure can be solved only, or at least can be solved as fast and as efficient as possible by collaboration across the value chain. And for that, I need to kind of echo one of the points that was mentioned already twice, but it's such at the core of what we do, is the lack of transparency and the existence of uncertainties was mentioned before, and that's something where we are working hard on to push towards a more transparency on the environmental footprint of digital infrastructure, not only data centers, but the entire supply chain and the efficiency and the effectiveness of which on how the entire sector is being run. That will allow policymakers, purchasers, or just individuals like you and me to make more climate-informed decisions as to what the impact is of our digital actions. Digitalization has helped us in enormously. It's being, it is the absolute foundation of our current and future economic growth. And we strongly believe that we owe it to ourselves and to future generations to make this foundation as climate neutral as possible. And given the rapid developments throughout the entire value chain, there can be made wonderful and less climate impactful decisions and new designs and new architectures to allow for a rapid decarbonization. I do want to stress one point, and perhaps just to set a bit the tone of the debate, is that I think that yes, data centers are a absolute essential part of the infrastructure, but I always love to stress the point that the absolute the value add towards the economy is the software and the applications running on the servers, on the drives, and the data stored on the disks. That's what we are using now in this call. That's what allows us to stream. And data centers are an absolute important integral enabler in that sense. But the added value comes from the true innovation in software and the way that that's pushed the boundaries. The entire value chain, one may say, only exists because of the need that applications and software have. There is not a natural evolutionary balance that existed and all of a sudden a data center popped out of existence. It is because of the demands that software and other applications have, and that's basically trickling down. And that's, I think, from a way of thinking, from a solution perspective, a very interesting angle to approach the topic. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dan. And you are not leaving it at that, because I hope you're staying with us for the next hour to complement yes. what we say here in the room. The last person to introduce is myself. I'm Manuel Mateo Goyer. I work in DG Connect at the European Commission. I'm the deputy head of unit of the Cloud and Software Unit, and as such, we are one of the quite a few teams inside the Commission that looks into the climate neutrality, highly energy efficiency and sustainability of data centers. And the last person to present and introduce and to thank very warmly is Juan Arregui. He's sitting next to me. I don't know if the camera will go that far, but he's right there. And he's been preparing the today's panel and helping us all of us to prepare for it. And he's the one surveilling the questions online. So he will wave at me in case this materializes. I promised that we would first then delve and dive into the energy efficiency directive. I think policymakers and the Brussels bubble is used to what we're experiencing here, in the sense that all the speakers presented a very broad scope spanning many different dimensions. But then the attention of the day is really on the provisions of that are about data center in the energy efficiency directive. It was part of a proposal by the Commission in July of last year, part of the broader Fit for 55 package to reach our climate targets for 2030. In short, the data center initial provisions were about the reuse of waste heat, so there was a bit of that, a little bit about improving the public procurement dimension, which would as well affect data centers. But then there were some really focused measures on data center, including this idea of reporting in a central database, to call it like this, and in a transparent, so in a publicly available database, the energy performance of data centers above a given threshold. for purposes precisely of transparency and awareness. Niels, I promised I would give you back the microphone, but I think my opening question is, so there was this excellent proposal from the Commission and my colleagues from DG Ener. How did the Parliament improve it? Was there, I mean, it's very obvious from the different votes in the Parliament that the consensus, and you detailed that in your opening words, was quite broad, but I think we're interested in the inner discussions within the Parliament. And I think maybe if you have a crystal ball on how you see the discussions moving forward with the Council, you said the trilogue, so this is the moment where the two co-legislators bring their own improvements to the initial text from the Commission and agree on a final text. How do you see the the Council position, and do you see it very apart, or do you see room for an easy agreement in between the two institutions on those provisions? Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Manuel. Yes, it is hard to improve something which is already excellent, but we have made a try. I think maybe, Manuel, you said it today, depending on how you measure the data center's consumption of electricity, it's about 3% of the electricity consumption. But we know that the data centers in the coming years will consume more and more electricity because we will have more and more data centers. It seems like they're here to stay. There is in my own country, Denmark, we have a climate council which has been established by the government that makes different analysis. They made an analysis, a forecast of the electricity consumption of data centers, and they expect that by 2030 they will consume 17% of our electricity in Denmark, which is quite a lot, of course, and I think we will see similar expansions of data centers and thus also their consumption of electricity in other member states. I heard we had a debate when we debated the Energy Efficiency Directive, there was an Irish member who talked about a figure of more than 30%, a forecast that said more than 30% of the electricity will be consumed by data centers in Ireland by 2030. They, of course, have a cluster, I think, of data centers. But I think our attention to data centers really reflects that we agree on the analysis that it will become more, it's already important, and it will become more and more important. They will consume more of our electricity, and so we need to make sure that they are energy efficient and that we do what we can to increase the standards of the data centers when it comes to their energy consumption. So what we did in the Parliament compared to the European Commission's proposal is basically to make it, well, you know, we agree with the part saying we should basically have more transparency. Data centers need to disclose their energy consumptions and their energy standards, and they need to do that by March 2024. We also say that the member states should collect this data on the data centers in a central database, so we have an overview over the standards, how are the energy performance standards of data centers, so that we can all see that. But then we also say, we go a bit further here, saying that the Commission by March 25 should make a report based on this data that we now have available, assessing the energy standards of the data centers, and if the Commission, if it is appropriate, according to the Commission, from this report, the Commission should come with a proposal, legal proposal on minimum standards for the data centers, for the energy performance. And I hope that this will survive in the trilogue negotiations. I know that the Council, they only want to, well, as far as I understand their position, they want to have the information. They want the data centers to report on their performance standards, but they don't talk about minimum standards. We talk about minimum standards, and I think that that would be a good idea. Obviously, we all agree on that. But I mean, taking the figures into account of how much electricity they will consume, I think it's fair to have some minimum standards. I think that the first step is obviously to get the information, to get the transparency, to get the overview, but then I think we could go further. The second thing we do, which I will just mention, and I think that's a new thing compared to the Commission's proposal, is that we also address the question on waste heat from data centers. We say that data centers have to be connected. If there's a district heating network, the data centers have to be connected to that district heating network so that they can use the waste heat. And if they don't want to be connected, they have to show that it's not either technically or economically feasible. So we reverse the burden of proof. So we say the normal situation is that if there's a district heating network, the data centers should be connected. And if they don't want to, they have to show and convince the authorities that it's not possible. And I think that would be a good thing. I know in Denmark, we are the country that has the most district heating in Europe, and we have 54 data centers in Denmark, but only 4 of those data centers are connected to the district heating network. And I think we might return to the public perception on the data centers, but as far as I can see, people are not happy about this in a time of energy crisis and soaring energy prices. I think that the general attitude towards data centers have gone from very positive a decade ago to now. We have stories, different parts in different parts of Denmark where people and local politicians are saying this is not okay, that the data centers, they consume so much electricity and then they don't contribute with using the waste heat so that the consumers can benefit. So I think that needs to change. I hope that it is also a cultural change and data centers will start taking this into account. But if they don't, we are also ready with a legal proposal here.
Thank you very much, Niels. I think it's very good to hear it from you because it's something to read what the Parliament has voted. It's something else to have the commented reading, and that's extremely insightful. I'm tempted to ask Claudia, what's the view of the industry in this debate? I know you're not speaking on behalf of all the industry, but obviously your members are a significant part of it, and I'm sure you have a view, and you've been discussing among you. Sorry, interesting lapses, but no, it's among you. So, what are your thoughts about all those discussions?
I'll stand up because it's much better. Yes, indeed. We do have some views on the Energy Efficiency Directive. I just want to stress again that our members welcome the efforts on the Energy Efficiency Directive, also from the European Parliament, the Council and the Commission. And I just want to stress that what's important when it comes to the Energy Efficiency Directive is to actually make sure that we first make sure that we use the energy efficient, and then we reduce the energy. And sometimes all the provisions do not actually do that, and we think that can be done a bit better. So, but before that, I just want to stress one thing for the audience. The data center industry has unique characteristics. We know it has high energy intensity, also rapid growth, large power consumption, and water usage. And this, of course, requires specific provisions. And I think our members are ready to help with the directive, with the proposal, but I think it needs a bit more discussion. Our members at least think it needs a bit more discussion. I think it would be too technical to go into these elements here, but we are very open to help our institutional stakeholders to put together the right, not the right, but the best provisions to ensure that we actually do we are actually efficient, we have efficient data centers, and we actually reduce the energy use.
Thank you very much, Claudia. I think the natural follow-up question is to Peter, because as we discussed now, one of the core provisions is the idea of a database for the transparent reporting of data center performance, energy performance, and those databases we imagine could be gathered, or this information could be gathered at member state and then consolidated at European level. I mean, this is almost a little bit the mechanics of how the collection would happen, but I think the core is the collection and the transparency. And Peter, in your opening remarks, you were talking about the German experience in that regard, which I believe, but so that's my first question, is how advanced are those German, is this German initiative, and what are the difficulties that you're facing, the challenges, what is how has the industry reacted to it, and how far are you from, let's put it like this, stabilizing such a German scheme?
Well, thank you, Manuel. Well, first of all, I would say always if there is a legal action coming forward, people are reluctant against it. So they first be very skeptical. They know that each activity will bring additional burdens. On the other hand, they know themselves that it would be helpful if you're doing some kind of benchmarking on energy efficiency, if you talk with industry. Typically, each company wants to know what is the industrial benchmark of the sector, but nobody wants to provide its data to make the benchmark happen. So I think it's the right approach to push companies which have a significant impact on energy to report on their energy numbers, and therefore I fully support this approach, which is introduced in the EED directive. On the other hand, based on our experiences, we know as well it's highly complicated. And Emma already mentioned it in the beginning in her statement. You need to start from step one. So you need to define what is the data center and the variety of data centers, and also therefore what they are delivering and what can be their efficiency and which data then they have available and they can report on is quite different. So what we are mainly struggling in a first step on a German level, where to define the data points as precisely as possible, that everybody speaks about the same numbers. And for example, even for the power usage effectiveness, if you look on how companies report on the power usage effectiveness, there is some differences in how do you calculate it. And so you not only need to say, yes, please report your power usage effectiveness, but you have to describe where you have to measure the parameters, how you have to measure the parameters, and so on. And that goes in many, many details, and that makes it so difficult also on our German approach. We know as well as data centers are part of the critical infrastructure, as at least the data centers above 3.5 megawatt, and this is the main sort of data centers we are approaching. So they have some reluctance to make their data public, and I think the opposition against making this collected data public is much stronger than the collection of the data themselves. So we need to be very careful on deciding which information will be made public. And what we have also learned from the industry, the data center industry is not a German industry, it's not a Danish industry or Swedish industry, it's an international industry with a lot of American players, Asian players, and what is their aim is to have a uniform approach within Europe. So a very important step is that we have a uniform approach within Europe, and therefore we need to ensure that the different member states do not transpose too differently what is written in the directive in the national laws. And I think as a last point, the point on waste heat, maybe I would like to comment. Today, we are already in a situation where each data center is very happy if someone would be taking the waste heat. It's not that they are not willing to share it, they are looking for someone who takes it. And especially district heating systems are still today operated at 90 to 120 degrees, and the waste heat of data centers still is at a temperature of, say, between 25 and 35. So you need a heat pump to upgrade it, and it might not be always possible easily to put it into the district heating system. And what we see and encounter very often is that the operators of the district heating systems, they do not want to have this heat, as they already have enough heat, for example, from their waste incineration plants. They have a combined cycle plant. And if you include additional waste heat in your system, you might have trouble as you have to shut down your combined heating system, or you need to waste the heat at your waste incineration plant as you have to burn the waste anyway. So despite, as it's look very easy to say, let's the data center, enforce the data center that they have to deliver the heat, you need to look on the full delivery chain. So you need someone who takes the heat, who transport it, and you need someone who is willing to take the heat and consume it. So this makes it very difficult, and that's this kind of transposition from a European directive over a national directive into the realization of projects. And this is what is important. Only the realization of such projects will finally deliver emission reductions. This is a long way, and I think what is needed is that everybody is made aware about the challenges, and that we are trying to implement it together. It should be a joint approach of all parts of the value chain, not only the data centers.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I picked in particular on the single market dimension of your remarks, which I think is we can all sympathize with. Picking on a question that Juan passes me from the audience, and so this is a blink for more questions, please, to come. A tiny 5 seconds follow-up, Peter. When looking at the transparency of the reporting of the measures, who ensures that the transparency is correct? I mean, how do you ensure that the figures are the right ones? Is it because the reporting is done by a third-party audit?
Well, what we are planning in Germany, at least, I do not know if it's also written into the directive, is that we require data centers to set up an energy management or environmental management system, which is certified. So at least you would then have a certification of these numbers, which is a third-party certification. But for sure, then this depends a little bit on the size of the data center. The focus will be in Germany first on data centers above 1 megawatt of electric capacity. If you have smaller ones, then the additional cost of this kind of certification is quite high, and therefore we need to be careful also not to make too strict regulations on the smaller data centers, as otherwise we would put them out of the market.
Good. Thank you very much, Peter. I think it amply answers this online question. Maybe a final question a joint question to Dan and Emma. Niels brought forward a new feature of the Parliament proposal that comes on top of the Commission initial proposal, which is this possibility I think that's the right word. That's in 2025, so rather in a second stage after the transparency has produced its first effects, that minimum performance targets should be set and established. And I would like to tap into both of yours encyclopedian type of knowledge to know whether this has ever been the case anywhere else in the world, or if such attempts have been discussed. And I mean, I think we can all imagine the associated difficulties, but if there are life situations that you can relate to.
I think one of the interesting things, which actually chimes back to the comment Peter just made about collecting and disclosing the data, is we've done that in the UK since 2013 for co-location providers, and it wasn't regulated. It was a voluntary scheme called the Climate Change Agreement, and operators would sign up to this agreement. They would agree to make energy efficiency improvements, which were bespoke to every data centre depending on its PUE. PUE had to be measured in a completely consistent way with the same spot, so it's consistent over time. And we reported these figures per operator, essentially, sometimes per facility. And I reported that I was responsible for reporting them. And what was interesting was no one had the slightest interest in them. I put them out in the public domain year after year. But they actually are incredibly useful. The issue with them was that the data centres that were allowed in this scheme were co-location only. So it missed all the sort of large enterprise hidden away in banks. It missed all the small enterprise on premise, where I think we'd have learned some really, really, really interesting things about practices in sort of small on-premise server rooms. And it missed public sector. So I think the learning from that is that actually there isn't anything to be too afraid of collecting this data and publishing it. What I think is the important thing is that you capture as much of the market as you can. The second point of your question was really about how you would then introduce a minimum standard, but I think you can only do that when you look at the spread of standards and where those sit within the different providers across the sector. So I think that's a chicken and egg thing. Although in this case, the chicken is first.
I'm not sure a data center can be qualified as a chicken, but we'll take
if I may supplement that.
Yes, please, Dan.
From my side.
I was going to pass you the floor, please.
Sorry, yes. I think that the aim is a very good one, but we have to be careful that we're building this extra requirement on the right data sets. And at the moment, large part of the industry remain a relatively, black box, despite the fact that, it's a data-driven industry, but still a lot of the transparency is lacking. So trying to aim for a standard at the moment would be a bit of, shooting in the dark and then hoping that we would come out. Now, I'm absolutely in favor of setting a standard, but by doing so data-driven once we got the data, and being able to differentiate between, indeed, a public cloud, enterprise cloud, on-prem, the rise of edge cloud. So how do we deal with all these different data points? And one of the ways that we're trying to, I don't want to say circumvent it, but try to solve the question from a different angle is rather go around and say, okay, here's a piece of software, and that software should have access to its environmental footprint, not only looking at energy efficiency or energy consumption at any given moment in time, but rather taking the life cycle analysis framework and assessing and trying to assess, okay, by using this software from moment X to moment Y, I'm using this many resources, both operationally in terms of energy and water and whatnot, but also embedded what is had to be used for the creation of the hardware that I'm using, and of that, those embedded emissions and those rare earth metals and other ingredients, how much can be recycled, should be recycled, and how much of that is actually being depleted. And that gives over the entire value chain a in our view, let's say, a completer picture of the full environmental impact, because I really like our focus on energy, and it is an energy intensive industry. So I think that's really the low hanging fruit. But if we go for more energy efficient servers and replenish and replace the entire content of a data center every X years, that has a certain environmental impact when you look at the the hardware that we discard or that we might be able, yay or nay, reuse. And I think that that's part of the overall question, the overall challenge that we need to solve. It goes beyond the efficiency and beyond the operational use, but has to go in towards the embedded emission in the hardware that are being used to deliver us, for instance, disk streaming connections and other services that we use.
Thank you very much, Dan. So with this, I think it's the moment to close the chapter on purely energy efficiency and the energy efficiency directive as such. I think we've seen through the different comments and inputs that one thing is the legal basis and the legal principles, and then it's up to the details to kick in, right? To how do we implement this? And I think all the insights of the on-the-ground people around the table were very useful in that respect. I'd like to take 10 minutes, or rather a shorter question, because as I mentioned, the topic of data centers is very broad, and we've covered that in the introduction, and now we focused on a narrow aspect, which is the transparency and wasted measures, which are part of the Energy Efficiency Directive. But there are other dimensions, and among the many of them, there's one which the title of the session is Sustainable Data Centers. And in policymaking, very often when speaking about sustainable data centers, so it's sustainable, highly energy efficient and climate neutral, and the sustainable is the umbrella word for how well do we account for the so-called embedded energy, so the energy that went into the materials of the data center. How do we reuse the materials? How do we recycle them? How do we, if really needed, do we dispose of them? And it's kind of interesting that this is a bit less the focus at the moment. I think as well it's because the policy cycle is a bit different. The main instrument, the main legal instrument is the WEEE directive, W with the threes, the Electrical and Electronic Equipment Waste Directive, which my colleagues of the DG for Environment are about to, they have in their work program the task of launching an assessment of how it's ongoing. So I'm sure this question will come back to the forefront. But having said that, it's obvious that data centers are big consumers of electronic and electrical material. That's not equipment. Let's not forget about this. Emma, you brought that a little bit in your opening, but can you dig into it and explain to us how well is the data center industry doing in that respect? Are they doing it on a professional level, on a sustainable level? What is the good, the bad, and the ugly in that respect?
So we isn't my main subject, but I certainly have a bit of a feel for what's been going on. So if you're looking at co-location providers, then they don't own the hardware that's inside the facilities, so they don't tend to need to engage in sophisticated WEEE programs for IT hardware. What we are seeing are things like in the larger providers, closed loop. So we're seeing, while we see quite fast what we call rates of server refresh, we're seeing a lot of sophistication in how that server refresh is calculated. And what I am seeing is that in the past, the rate at which you changed out a server to replace it with a new one was driven entirely by energy. And now it's driven by a whole range of broader sustainability factors, which I think is really important because that actually lengthens the time slightly. The second thing that's changed is that the whole server, certainly with large providers, doesn't seem to be being replaced. It's just simply replacing the processor or the minimum possible number of components within that. So that's my understanding, that they tend to operate closed-loop systems. And I think if you look at any of the large cloud service providers' sustainability reports, they'll have some really interesting details on those kind of activities. The other thing that I've seen elsewhere in the sector is the provision of servers as a service. So then you get another closed loop where the server never leaves the ownership of the manufacturer. So I'm seeing that. I'm not sure how widely that is adopted, but I've certainly seen that around. And then sometimes, I think there's some very big drivers here. Sometimes one of the drivers about, things like disk crushing rather than deletion is customer driven rather than operator driven. So that's a conversation that needs to happen up the value chain. But I think a very powerful driver is increasingly material scarcity. And if you actually look, there's a very compelling diagram when you look at the materials that are in short supply that relate to ICT functions. That list is growing, and it's quite scary in some cases. So that's going to be a driver like no other, I suspect, very soon. So those are my comments. I don't think they go into much detail, but that's my observations.
You're right, Emma. I think it opens new parts of the debate, and the material scarcity and how does Europe in general confront to that situation is yet another dimension of this complex puzzle. I wonder, Peter, because you in your opening statements, I think you have a very broad industrial overview, not only of data centers, but of other sectors. And I'm wondering what, in your view, and in terms of sustainability and material use and reuse, what can the data center industry learn from other industries?
Well, what we already see that in many energy-intensive sectors of industry, we have quite good recycling loops. If you look on the steel industry, if you look on the aluminium industry or the paper industry or the glass industry. And all these kind of recycling activities, even if pushed by national regulations or European regulations, are typically having an economic benefit. And I think even if we are talking about the different drivers, material scarcity, water availability, electricity supply, and things like that, finally, we are dealing always with companies, and the DNA of a company is making profit. And so if material scarcity, it's not the material scarcity which drives companies, it's the increasing cost of scarce materials. And similar for energy, if energy is scarce, it's expensive, and then people try to look on how they can reduce their costs. So we should keep this always in mind, that people are driven by costs in companies. And the only challenge we have is, in principle, that we are running late. So as long as everything is cheap, we do not care. And then from one day to another, the prices skyrocket, like the gas prices, which increased 10 times. And now energy efficiency, oh my God, we need to look for energy efficiency. And I think this is a challenge, what we need to implement, that we already need to start such activities at the moment in time when they are not as economic as you would like that they are implemented. But keep in mind that this will come. And other industries have, in principle, doing the same as the data center industry. They have been waiting until the last moment. So when we're looking on decarbonization in the steel industry, we had the traditional blast furnace route, and nobody was thinking really about alternative routes. And now industry is transforming due to a number of constraints, CO2 emission certificate prices going up and things like that. And I would believe that the data center industry do the same. And I think what we should keep in mind, and that's the big challenge with co-location. Co-location means we have a split responsibility. So it's a similar issue like in the renting market. So you have the landlord and the tenant, and
in principle, a co-location data center is nothing else. You have the landlord and the tenant, and then the incentive for improving energy efficiency is for the landlord is rather limited normally, and that's similar to the co-location data center. So you need some set some boundaries, legal boundaries, to drive the people in the right direction. Therefore, I think sustainability is an issue. People have been waking up in the industry. We have the target set to be carbon. The data center have the voluntary agreement to be carbon neutral until 2030. So there is a number of activities. We see recycling, reuse of components going forward. So I think the industry is on the right way, and if it's supported by financial support and legal measures, I think I'm very optimistic that the data center industry will make its way.
Thank you very much, Peter. And listening to you, I couldn't help but remember and invite you to look back at what President von der Leyen said in her State of the Union speech 2 weeks ago about the forthcoming raw material initiative, which I think precisely aims at the subjects you were talking about, material scarcity and trying to prevent scarcity to affect Europe in undue manner. We are a bit short of 20 minutes to go, and I promised that we would have a little bit more of an upbeat end of discussion. So rather than looking at the problems of the ICT side, so how the ICT needs to become greener, that we look as well a little bit of how the ICT can contribute to the green transition and the data centers in particular. The very final question, Niels, I anticipate will be for you. It will be how can the Parliament pick up on the good ideas that we will now hear from the different speakers. But so be careful about what they say. Claudia, let's start with you. Your organization represents a huge part of the digital industry, and so you explain now that being mindful about environment and climate, but how does the other way work? What are the contributions of your sector to the greening of society in general?
Thank you for this question, Manuel. Maybe I can start my answer with this. It's not recent, but there is this EUSEW study which actually shows that digital technologies can contribute to the slashing of 20% of green gas emissions across other industries. So to have the upbeat message about data centers. And well, besides the fact that data centers are themselves becoming more sustainable, the industry has been taking important, significant steps towards this. We've discussed this already, and what I can say is that data centers can empower other industries, other sectors to become greener and to cut down on their emissions. And there are some ways to do this. I will just name, for example, edge computing, which is also the response to the ever increasing demand for data on site. Also, by shifting to cloud experience powered by data centers, companies can see considerable reductions in their operational emissions, while also reducing costs and boosting benefits. And I can also name virtualization, which is also another way for other sectors to cut down on their emissions. Just in a nutshell, some of the benefits. And of course, I don't want to forget, or I want to mention again the benefits to consumers from data centers. Actually, we're just powering, data centers are powering everything that is happening right now, everything that happened during COVID crisis. So everyone was having access to the dear ones through various channels, which were also powered by data centers. And everything that we're doing online today is powered by data centers. So economically speaking, these are other benefits in addition to the others I just mentioned.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Dan, I'll be moving to you. And the question is a little bit the same, bearing in mind that I understand your organization focuses on the greening of ICT, but I think I'm sure the other perspective is very much in your mind. And I'm going to drop as well a couple of questions, not necessarily to you, but at least so that everybody is aware of them and can say a sentence if appropriate, questions that come from online. There's a question about, I think, requirements for transparency in co-location services. I think, Emma, you've talked a bit about it, and the UK experience would certainly be relevant. There's someone asking whether we're putting too much burden on EU operators and whether this can be detrimental to the EU industry. So I think, Niels, this one will be for you in your closing remarks. And I think there's the one very relevant question about water. We've been discussing about energy efficiency, and energy efficiency sometimes, but not always, is achieved in data center at the expense of water consumption and sometimes clean water consumption. So I think that would be very interesting to have your insights. And Dan, Peter, and Emma, you distribute among you as you see it relevant. Dan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks very much. Let me pick up on the last one right away, because there's a logical correlation between the use of water and the use of energy and the use of water for cooling. And I think one of the great, to keep the story upbeat, which I think is really, has its own right, is the fact that liquid cooling is really taking off. And I know it's been a promise of the industry for a long time. And I know that we've all been discussing it over and over again. But you see now more and more also the bigger players starting to invest, build and operate liquid cooled facilities. And with liquid cooled, just to be sure, right, we're not referencing water here. It's rather a different kind of emulsion that captures the heat in a much more efficient way, no longer preventing the need for water to cool down a facility through adiabatic cooling. And I think that is a fantastic development, also allowing for more waste heat, or rather, I would say residual heat, because I don't want to call it the waste heat. It's just residual heat coming out of the facilities and to be able to be used in the network. And there, as you see, for instance, in the region, so SEIA is a European-based but global NGO. I myself am based in the Netherlands, in the province of North Holland. And there you see that the province has made fantastic strides in their data center policy by enforcing, but most and above and beyond, enabling that waste heat capture by data center owners and operators, because technically the solution is not that challenging. It's more often different languages, different sectors needing to talk to each other and to tackle the more often legal and commercial agreements rather than the technical one. And we're collaborating there to make it actually possible. And that would really help, in my view, also to enlarge the public support for data centers, because it's not only energy consumption, but it's also allowing you to Netflix and Instagram and whatnot at night, and it's warming your house. I mean, this is win-win.
Thank you very much, Dan, and in particular to pick on the question of water, which is, as the Commission and the Joint Research Center in one of their studies put it, a nexus of how the two work together. not only in the context of data centers, but in many other situations. Peter, you're next. So back to the question, how does digitalization of society, what does it bring in terms of benefits to the rest of the society in terms of improved environmental performances? And since you have a big industrial background, maybe you can give us a couple of examples. You mentioned earlier the paper or the steel or the aluminum industries, but I'm sure you have a couple of examples to explain to the layperson how this works in practice.
Well, first of all, I think the value of digitalization is obvious for everybody. So if you're looking back 10 years, we would be never having such a hybrid conference. We would be all traveling by plane to Brussels, sitting together and all flying back. So I think we have something like 500 people in the audience. I suppose the majority of them, maybe 500, will be online in the session. And we already can calculate very easily, I think, the energy and emission saving we have due to this digitalization. And that's similar in many areas. We have reduced travel. We have a better control of industrial processes, which brings down the energy consumption. So, and I suppose that nobody in this call would like to give his mobile phone away for the next 20 years. So they all want to have it. It's what you say. It's your partner, and you go to bed with it, and you go up in the morning with your mobile. So I think digitalization is obvious to something.
Thank you.
Another point, I just one small point to add is the question on what to do with the co-location. And I think what was mentioned was that it is important not to look on the energy efficiency of the data center, but to look also on the efficiency on computing. So this kind of software optimization and things like that are quite important. And if you look on the regulation on the EED directive, what we have done or what are the plannings in Germany is that especially in co-locations, they cannot report on the IT hardware, which processes are running there. And therefore, what you can do and what we are thinking about in Germany is that we will have not only an obligation for data center operators, but for IT operators. So for companies which having a significant IT footprint in a co-location data center, they should be obliged as well to report their numbers so that you have the full picture, not only from the housing of the data center, but from the IT as well. As if you're looking on POE, the IT is the one before the comma, and the cooling and all the things is the number behind the comma, and therefore we should look on and focus on the one before the comma.
Thank you, Peter. And I think the distance hybrid formats of conferences it's obvious. I mean, if we're 500 online, we must be about 50 in the room. Can I have a hand raise of the people who traveled to be here in Brussels today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're at 1 or 2% of the audience who has traveled for today. So I think it's a good, it's an impressive achievement of digitalization. So thank you very much for those hands. Emma, the second last word is for you, and on those big challenges, you have only 2 minutes to go.
Okay, so co-location reporting, that was asked. That isn't a problem. That's easy. They already tell their customers how much energy they're using, and that's the basis of charging. So that isn't a problem, making that transparent. I think the cloud service providers will have a very good grip on their energy, but it'll be harder for them to attribute by customer. The problem for reporting is not there. It's in, say, public sector or enterprise data centers, where the guy who runs a data center is not in charge of the power. those are the ones where they're really, really going to struggle to report. Water, it's all about where you set your systems boundaries, but I think I'm going to leave that with Dan. In terms of society, I think the greatest illustration we had of just the social contribution that data centers could make was what happened when we had lockdown. And within 10 days, everything went online and we managed to continue business. And I was incredibly proud of the sector managing to achieve that. And you could immediately see the sustainability impacts of that as that happened. So I just think you don't have to look any further than that to see what can be done.
Fantastic, Emma, and thank you very much for your brevity in concluding. Thank you very much. So I'll bid farewell to everyone and then pass the final words to Niels. For the ones who liked and enjoyed today, but still want a bit more, today we tried to have a more policy-oriented discussion. But if you feel you need a more technical complement and need to go back to the one-on-one of data center and how they work, as part of the university, we call it like this, that DG Connect maintains. We're having a session tomorrow morning on data centers and how they work and the concepts that you've all heard today. And we all know them by heart, but maybe sometimes it's good to go back to school, to university. We have a session tomorrow morning. Juan just posted the link for anyone to come and register. We'll have excellent speakers, Emma again, but we'll have a different panel than today, and with a focus less on debating and more on practical understanding of how this works. So I'd like to thank again all the organization and in particular Juan Arregui for his help in putting this together today. But Niels, the final word is for you, and I won't even speak afterwards. So you have to turn the mic off, to drop the mic at the end. You've now heard we've done a final round of talks from the remaining panelists of different ways in which digitalization can help the transformation further in the energy sector, but in other sectors as well. How do you think the Parliament can take this forward? Do you have a hunch from your many discussions with your colleagues on the ground?
So basically, I think, and thank you for a good discussion here. I think high quality inputs. I think that the Parliament and the EU as such needs to set some targets for how much we want to reduce energy consumption and how, which standards, environmental standards we should live up to. And then I think it's the industry and the entrepreneurs and the innovators that need to come up with solutions, including digital solutions that I hear the panel, and I agree, think that the digital solutions will be of vital importance. So I think that's the way we should work. We should not, also in relation to the question on putting burdens on operators, that the one person asked about, I think we should not, of course, over-regulate. I think the EU should set the targets and the standards, and then we need the industry and the innovators to get to work. But I think that, just a final remark, that when it comes to the data centers, I think we need to make some rules, because this is to some degree a wild west, in the sense that it's not a new phenomenon, but it's been growing so much that we are a little bit behind as regulators, as far as I'm concerned. We need to get up to speed and to say, okay, this is a sector which has a still larger energy footprint and an environmental footprint. I think the discussion on the environmental footprint and the life cycle analysis is very important as well. So we need to regulate that, and I think that Peter Radgen said it well, that now, before we had the energy crisis, nobody was so concerned about energy. Now Putin invaded Ukraine, and energy efficiency, it needs to happen. And I think it's an example of that the market cannot always see long ahead in the future. The market cannot predict this, so we cannot leave all these things to the market and to the operators' energy efficiency standards. I think they're doing a lot, and it's great what they're doing, but I think we also need, as regulators, to set some standards, trying to look ahead. We cannot leave all the decisions to the market. That would be free market fundamentalism from my point of view. So we need to find the balance, not put too much burdens on operators, but as this, when we speak about data centers, it's a rather new phenomena when we talk about the size that they have today. I think we need to get up to speed and set some standards. Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Niels, and thank you very much to all the panelists. Have a good evening to everyone. Bye-bye.